Welcome to the Cat's Corner with your host, Ernest the Cat Miller, 3, 4, 5-time World Karate Champion, WCW legend, WWE legend. I'm your co-host, Big Shug, Ray Keziah, coming to you always. Waiting on Mr. Lash LeRoux to come in.
He's coming in now. Let me let him in right now.
There he is. There is Mr. Lash LeRoux.
LeRoux, you look. What's up, Big Lash?
Man, I'm just kicking like a pack of ninjas.
Hey, do you want me to call you Lash LeRoux or Lash? What do you like? What do you prefer?
Oh, I don't care, man. Lash is fine.
Well, you know, back in the day, I used to just call you the kid.
Right.
The kid.
I was the kid.
Yeah, I couldn't think of your name anyway. I was like, get the kid in here. Get the kid in here.
Let me school him a little bit, is what Ernest was saying. The cat was saying, let me school the kid.
Yeah, let me get. But you know what? And I'm going to tell you this right here. You were one of the better guys to work with. And I remember the day your name came up and everybody talked about this new guy. He's going to be like, he's going to burn it up. I think you was the cruiserweight there, right?
Yeah, absolutely I was.
So with you being a cruiserweight, man, and everybody was talking about you, I look forward to seeing you there. I remember the first time I saw you in the ring, you was doing you doing pretty good, very athletic. You know, and it surprised me. You had the biggest red afro I've ever seen. I don't know if you would call it afro. It was, I've seen one like that before. It was on Ronald McDonald. I don't know if you remember him.
Yeah, I stole his gimmick.
But Mr. LeRoux, I just want people to take this conversation serious because, you know, here on the Cat's Corner, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to, I just want to interview my friends, and I consider you one of my friends.
Hey,
you know,
I feel the same way, Cat. I'm proud to be on it, man. I'm proud to be on it. Let me adjust his camera angle a little bit there. There we go. That's a little better.
Yeah. Looking good. Lash, I'm they call me Big Shug, manager of future Hall of Famers. I am as Ernest the Cat Miller's co-host, and I'd like to welcome you to the Cat's Corner podcast.
Thank you.
I was a fan of your work back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Showed a lot of promise, and then of course what happened with WCW kind of derailed what you had going, the momentum that you had built up. What did you do, if I could ask a few questions to start, what did you do right after WCW went out?
Well, a lot of people don't realize this, Big Shug, but I was actually one of the first 24 guys they signed over from WCW into WWE.
Awesome.
And the bill of goods that was sold to us versus how it panned out wasn't the same. I'm sure that Cat had a similar story in that regard. But, you know, for me particularly, I was at home at the time. Eric Bischoff, and we can get in that story later, pulled me to the side and had taken me off TV for about 4 weeks and was getting ready to repackage after the MIA gig, you know, after that. And it was during that time that WCW was just abruptly sold to WWE. And nobody knew really what was going to happen next. I got a call from Johnny Ace about a week after that, and he said, "Hey, Lash."
Hey, man.
Yeah, man. He goes, "I got good news and I got bad news." I said, "I'm a bad news first kind of guy. What's the bad news?" He said, "The bad news is Vince is only interested in 24 guys from WCW." I said, "Well, what's the good news?" He said, "The good news is you're one of them." I said, "All right." I said, "Look, I've never been greedy. I've never been a big superstar-headed type of guy. I was just happy to be on the team and wearing a jersey, ready to do whatever they wanted." And over the course of the next few weeks, you know, I was kind of put on hold. And Johnny Ace would call me back. And so, Johnny, what are we going to do next? What's the next step? Am I signing a WWE contract? Well, for right now, Vince wants to just keep honoring the WCW contract. So that went on for about another week or two. And then my contract, Big Shug, was about to roll over to the last year of my WCW contract with a significant increase. And I got a call about 3 days before that was going to happen. I got called on a Friday, rolled over on a Monday. "Hey, Lash, Vince wants you to sign a WWE contract." "Sure, no problem." the good news is their contracts are structured a little differently, so you'll get less on the downside, but you were a workhorse in WCW. You were on every show. So
Hey,
on every show, you're going to make more than the end of the year.
hey, Lash. Now let me tell you what you should have done. You should have called Uncle Ernest the Cat.
I know.
And say, hey, Uncle Cat, what are you doing during these times? You know what I would have told you? Stay at home, collect your money from WCW because WWE contract is worth pennies.
Yes. Yeah.
They was worth. Listen, Johnny Ace called me with that same stuff when my contract. I said, Johnny, call me back in about a year. And he was like, a year? He said, but we want to sign you now. I said, call me back about a year. He said, why? Because I had another year left on my WCW contract getting paid at home.
Well, to show you how financially genius I am, Uncle Cat, this is what happened instead. What happened instead was I signed a contract where I took a $100,000 pay cut. And then a day after I signed that contract, they called me back and asked me to go to Cincinnati to HWA to help train some of those guys, is what they told me, for about 4 weeks. So they were ready to write me back into TV because Vince supposedly really liked the character. He liked the whole Cajun gimmick, was what I was told. But they wanted to go up there and knock the ring rust off since I've been off TV for a few weeks. I said, sure, no problem at all. Here's what should have been another red flag is I said, so you guys going to send me, plane ticket? What's the deal? Because Cincinnati's about 8 hours from where I live. He goes, Lash, you'd be better just driving up there so you don't have to get a rental car or anything. Dude, I went up there 4 weeks, turned into about 10 or 12 months I was stuck up there.
Hey, Lash, let me tell you what I'm hearing from you. And I want you to hear this out. Johnny Ace was a do boy right then. He was doing the dirty work. They hired him to no more tell us whatever we need to hear to get us up there. Because those are some of the same things he told me. And he told me, say, hey, Vince really like you. Vince wants you up here. He wants you working in here. And I said, call me in a year. And then when I get up there, they give me a bottom pay. I said, what's the bottom pay? He said, okay, it's a flat pay and you can earn money from this. And I said, how much is that? And that was about what I was making in 1 month in WCW. So me, I was like, wait a minute, let me do the math. And John Ace was talking to me. And when John Ace was in WCW, we had a pretty good relationship.
I felt the same way.
Yeah, a lot of people did not really like the upper talent, the top tier, like the Kevin Nash, the Scott Hall. They did not like Johnny Ace at all. I mean, they wouldn't listen to him at all.
No, they it's like they didn't respect him. I always respected him in WCW, had a great relationship with him in WCW. Thought he felt treated me pretty fairly. When I got to WWE, it was pretty apparent that he was going to do whatever the office wanted regardless.
Wait a minute. Did you hear what the office wanted him to do? Okay, then. Okay. Yeah. We should work backwards.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. Here's the thing, Cat, is when I started grumbling a little bit, when I started speaking up for myself a little bit, he literally pulled me aside and said, you're getting paid to train, kid. Where are you going to go and make this kind of money to train? And I said, right away, the last thing you're going to do to a kid from Alabama that grew up dirt poor like I did without running water or electricity is hold money over my head. I told him, I said, I'll go back to Alabama and I'll dig ditches before you'll hold money over my head.
Okay. Well, since you bringing that up then, what year did you get into WCW?
About 97.
And how did you get there from where were you in Alabama and how did you end up in WCW?
All right, here's the quick version of a long story, Cat. I grew up being a wrestling fan when I was a kid, like most kids, and I'm a child of the 80s. So I was right there at the heyday of Hulkamania.
80s? What did you say, 80?
Yeah, I was born in 76. So I was a kid in the 80s. Yeah, so right when Hulkamania hit, I was 10 years old, something like that, when it was hot.
How old are you now?
47. Can you believe it? That's how young I was.
Hell yeah, I believe. I thought you were 67. No, I'm just playing. Go ahead.
I know. So Yeah, so I grew up in a big wrestling fan. I fell away from it in the early 90s because I was so busy working. I started working when I was 9 years old. I was playing sports in high school. I was homeless my junior and senior year of high school while
Huh.
still playing football, still doing sports. I was a state champion wrestler. I was a state champion playing football. And so I had a pretty good athletic career from that standpoint, but I was never the standout star. I was the kid that you just couldn't outwork. I was a hard worker. There was plenty of guys that were the better athletes that got scholarships way before I did. But I'd worked my entire life for everything, man. And by the time I was a junior in high school, I was already engaged to my wife. And her family started helping me out a little bit. And then by the time I graduated high school, instead of being homeless, I was living in their basement. And so we started going to college together. Go ahead.
Yeah, what were your parents?
So
Your mom and dad?
I never knew my dad. Never knew my dad at all. Never knew anything about him. My mom raised 5 kids in Alabama by herself and quit school in the 8th grade. So we were just poor. And really the reason why I wound up homeless, Cat, was because when I was about 12 years old, my mom had a boyfriend that owned the house we rented from him, and he beat her up. And the only reason why I found out was because back then, when they did police reports on domestic violence, they took pictures with Polaroid cameras for evidence to put in there with the police report. And I found the police report and I saw the pictures of her beat up. And that's how I found out about that. Well, when I turned, I was too young to do anything about it when I was 12 because I didn't understand what was going on. When I was 15 and we wound up in that house again and he tried to do it again, I wasn't too young and I took a baseball bat to him. So that caused my family to scatter. And by that time, I was already supporting myself and taking care of myself. And I was with a football team in my hometown that was really part of the community. And we were making a run for a state championship. I didn't want to leave the area. So I stayed in the area, started supporting myself. And I slept in a clothing store at night behind the cash register from midnight to 5 a.m. That was my job. That was my paycheck. And that was my place to sleep.
So how did you get into WCW from there?
Yeah. So from there, when I started college with my wife, things got a little bit easier and it settled down. So instead of me scrambling and just trying to survive, I'm staying at her parents' house in the basement. Things are a little bit easier. They're supporting me as long as I'm going to school. I started watching wrestling again. And that's right when it blew up with the NWO. Monday Nitro started, and WCW was such hot business, they had those open tryouts, Cat, at the power plant. So I just went to an open tryout.
Yeah. And that's why I heard about you. Because remember, I had just came in 97 too.
Exactly.
But I was only in the power plant for about 2 months, and I ended up on Monday Night Nitro. So I left the power plant, but I would come back occasionally to work down there. But you guys, and that's why I first met you. And I went in, man, I was like, he's not very big.
No.
And you know, but everybody talked about you like you was like, I thought I was going to come down there and see another Scott Steiner or somebody like that. But you was athletic, man. And how long did it take for you to really kind of connect to the wrestling world as far as business in the ring?
Well, in the first week, because I was a big fan growing up, and you kind of can understand this. If you're a wrestling fan to start with, you have a better handle on the wrestling psychology because you know how matches are kind of supposed to go. And so I had a little bit of a handle on wrestling psychology, even though I didn't know anything about the wrestling business. In the first week I was in there, Chris Canyon saw something in me. And
I bet you he did.
Besides my good looks. And no, and he goes, hey Lash, let's have a match. And I said, a match? I said, I barely know how to lock up. He goes, do you know the moves? You ever watch wrestling? I go, yeah. He goes, I'll talk you through it and I'll protect myself. And man, I'm pile driving him and everything. And we had a good match. But even after that, I still was one of those that felt strongly about, I didn't want to have a wrestling match on the independents or anything else until I felt comfortable being able to call a match myself in the ring. And I drove from here in Alabama 2 hours to Atlanta at the power plant, 2 hours back, 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, paid them to train me for about 10 months before I finally had a match.
Well, let me slow you down because I know we in the middle and people might just tune in at this time. We want them to know exactly who we're talking to. Lash LeRoux. And
Yeah.
Lash LeRoux came in 1997.
That's right. Somebody had to be. I drew the short straw. So now, but during all that time, Cat, I was not somebody that's like, it's not like WCW went out and recruited me. It's not like WCW was looking for me. It's not like WCW had plans for me. So I'm having to make a spot for myself. So during all that time, I'm not just learning how to wrestle. I'm coming up with my character development. I'm coming up with promo skills. Everything that I established, I made up myself as I went along.
Now, who were you working with in the power plant?
Sarge, mostly. More often than not, Sarge, I would go in there and train with him in the ring as far as wrestling went. He would meet me early, would work out together before the day started at the power plant. Mike Winter helped some with the fundamentals when you first started. But Mike, that was kind of the extent of what he did. And Pez was really good at the intangibles. Man, Pez would walk in there. He wouldn't get in the ring and just work out with you all day long and do moves with you like Sarge would and just roll around. But he would walk in the middle of you doing something and you think he's not even paying attention. And he'd go, let me ask you something, Lash. Why don't you do it this way? And then all of a sudden it click and you go, wow, he's right, man. So he would pick and choose what he thought he needed to pull out of you at that time. He's the one that showed me how to throw such a great drop kick, because Pez would throw a drop kick and land on his feet.
But down in the power plant, we had Jody, Pez Whatley, Sarge, and what was his name?
Mike Winter.
Paul Orndorff.
Mike Winter, yeah. Listen, those guys was there for a reason. They wasn't just there because somebody said put them in the power plant. These guys were all really talented wrestlers, and they wanted to be in the ring too. But they all just happened to be training young guys like you, man. And for a guy to come in like you almost came in like I did. But I came in as a martial artist, kind of MMA fighter. But you came in and they put the candle, they lit the candle under you. I heard like people talking about this redhead guy. He was talented. And I remember when I first came down and I saw you in the ring and you were doing really well. And you might have been working with Chris Canyon. Yeah. And you look so ready for TV that I was thinking like, man, this guy right here gonna be on Monday Night Nitro next week. So this is good. And then I started looking around. You had people like Tony Carr. You had people like Hard Body Harrison. These guys have been in the power plant for damn near a whole year before you, and they were still waiting their turn. So when did you know you were ready for it? And who were you working with when you figured that out?
Well, here was the turning point for me, Cat. The turning point for me was for about the first 6 or 8 months, maybe even 9 months. I was just training, man, and I didn't have much of an opportunity. Now, the closest thing I had to an opportunity was they would tell us that we could go down to Orlando. Months into that, take your gear with you and let them know that you were there from the power plant. They would use you as enhancement talent. So my first wrestling match ever in my life was against Perry Saturn on Worldwide, and I put him over in about 4 minutes. It was just him annihilating me. And they still hadn't signed me to a contract at that point. I was just getting paid nightly. And then WCW signed a contract with EA Sports to do that first video game. And it was going to be the first wrestling video game where you wore a motion capture. And so they came down to Atlanta from Vancouver to film this to get an idea, okay, how they want to go about doing this particular game. And so all the guys were standing outside the ring, and they would stand in there and they go, okay, we need somebody that can do some power moves, who can do power bombs and power slams. So I'm a smaller guy, but I'm a pretty beefy guy too. I mean, I weighed about 235 legit.
Yeah, so let me ask something. So were you there now looking for money, or were you looking to get on TV and become a wrestler? I mean, which one? Because I know you was in need of money too, but were you doing it for the money, or were you doing just now for the career?
I was doing it for the career. I was doing it just for the break. Here's my mentality. When I came to the WCW power plant, to rewind that a little bit and to talk about the tryout process very quickly, that was a 3-day tryout, Cat. And as soon as I got there to the tryout, there was 24 guys in my tryout class. And out of those 24 guys, you had guys that were college football players, but not quite good enough for the NFL. You had guys
who was some of them? Name one of the guys in your class.
Oh God, I can't even remember now because this is how quick they fell apart. How quick they fell apart was you would have them, and then you would have like bodybuilders that were looking for ways to make money in the off season, and then you'd have guys that were just naturally 6'8", 400 pounds, but all those guys thought they had the look and thought WCW was going to let them check the boxes like it's an audition, and they're going to
wait a minute. In '97, didn't we have Bill Goldberg in that group?
No, he'd already come through. Goldberg had just come through, and he had
came
just
through with me. Yeah, okay,
yeah,
all right.
he had come through, and so, but they're in my group.
How about Bob South?
He came after.
Okay, all right, okay.
Yeah, he came after. I was on TV. The guys that came through right after me, and then when I say right after me, they were doing tryouts every month, Cat, when they do the open. And the guys right after me were Mike Sanders, Chuck Palumbo.
Okay.
Guys like that. Horseshoe, some of those guys. Johnny the Bull,
the Bull.
Yeah, Sean O'Hara. A lot of those guys came through about that time. Elix Skipper. But for me, Elix Skipper, Mike Sanders, and Alan Funk all came through at a close, very, very close to the same time, and I was the first of that bunch. But when I came through, my particular tryout class had 24 guys in it. And by the end of the first day, there were only 16 left. Yeah. By the end of the second day, there were 8. And by the end of the third day, me and one other guy showed up. And after we showed up, even then, they brought you into Jody's office. And Jody, who looked like Winston Churchill, would just lean, he'd fold his hands over his chest. And he goes, "All right, kid. Not saying you have a job. We're not saying you're going to be a wrestler. We're not saying you're sure as hell not a WCW wrestler. We're not signing you to a contract. The only thing we're promising you is you showed us enough to make us think you could be a wrestler. So if you want to pay us to train you, then we're willing to train you."
Hey, Big Ray, I got a question for you, Big Ray. Who was Jody Watley? What was Jody gimmick?
Yeah,
Jody Hamilton.
Jody Hamilton, not Jody Watley. Yeah,
Jody Watley was an R&B singer. She was really good. I'm looking for a new love, baby.
I'm looking at MTV over here on the left. Well,
yeah, I hear you.
Jody Hamilton.
Wasn't Jody Hamilton one of the state troopers with Dwayne?
Oh no. See,
what was Jody Hamilton? I can't remember.
Jody was one of the original assassins.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Southland. They cut Boogie Woogie Man's beard.
Yes,
with Paul Jones.
And man, he could cut great promos and had a great mind for it. Jody was perfect for psychology. I would go and sit
him and Hernandez. Assassin 1 and Assassin 2.
Hey, but Jody, think about Jody was one of the instructors in the power plant. And think about the career he had before he ever got down there.
Yeah, but he was big. He was big in the mid-'70s, though. That's why his
no. When you huge in wrestling, you never get small. That's what people make mistake. People think when you're over, all of a sudden, just because you're not on top anymore, you still got the knowledge. And that's why I'm saying people like
that's why they used him in the power plant, because of his knowledge. My question is, was Paul Orndorff and Brad Armstrong not also training in the WCW power plant then?
No,
that was after.
They came in after.
Brad Armstrong trained me, and he
was
was in
before
the power plant. Eric and those guys just put him on every house show with me, and his thing was to get me familiar, get me working in the ring. So my stay at the power plant, I came down 1 or 2 days, and I worked with Jody. But my thing was they put me with a wrestler to get on the road. I was getting ready for TV. So my guy was Brad and Paul Orndorff.
Yeah, no wonder your timing was so good, Cat, because there was nobody smoother than Brad Armstrong.
Oh man, he was. Listen, Brad was the best in that ring. And I think his
Candyman.
demons, and of course his demons was outside of the ring. But in that ring, man, there was nobody better. He was like, Chris Canyon was really good too. Isn't that kind of funny when you think about how talented those two guys were in the ring and how they life ended up almost working parallel to each other? Chris Canyon, what happened to Chris Canyon, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then Brad ended up dying so young. And the business is a great business, but it's a hard business, man. And the time I spent in there with you, how did you keep your head on straight?
It's funny, we talk about Brad Armstrong, and there's a couple of ways I was able to keep my head on straight, but I grew up watching Brad because here in Alabama, there was a territory. It was Continental Championship Wrestling, and the Armstrongs and Bullet Bob were the top baby faces. So they were huge when I was a kid. So I was already a Brad Armstrong fan, and he was the first person that walked through the power plant that I really recognized as a television wrestler. And when he walked in, I went, man, this is Brad. And I introduced myself to him, and he had just gotten out of rehab, Cat. And he said,
wow.
He had told me, because back then you could come to the power plant and pick up your checks there if you wanted to. And so he'd come up there and pick up his paycheck one day. And he looked at me and went right.
Hey, you remember that mean ass lady you had to come in and pick up your check from in the back? Hey, Ray, they'll give us our check, but they'll send them to the power plant sometimes.
Yep.
And the power plant lady left for lunch at the same time every day. So if you came in at that time and you wanted your check, she'll have out the lunch. I'll be back in like 3 hours. Her name was Brenda. She was
3 hours.
She was sweet to work with, but she did not play.
No, she didn't play it. So I met Brad. Brad had told me then, he goes, Lash, I'm telling you, Lash, don't ever mess around with those pills because you don't know they got you till they got you. Is what he told me about those. So I kind of, he tried to smarten me up early on, but the way I really kept myself clean for the most part in wrestling was I grew up with a lot of faith, and that's always been a hallmark of my life. And so that was an underpinning. So I came from that background, that Christian background, which was still important to me, but I would like to say it was all morals, Cap. But what it was even more so than that was I never had a dad, man, and I didn't have any kind of safety net. So if I started on the road and I got a little wilded out, man, and we're in Boise, Idaho, and I get in a bar fight and I wind up in jail, there's nobody for me to call to come bail me out, man. I got nobody. So that's what kept me clean is I had myself, and that was it. And I was so driven to be successful and show everybody, wrong, that I come from this white trash sort of background and upbringing that I could make something of myself, that it just drove me.
Well, tell me about the cartoon drawing. What's up with the card? You're a cartoonist?
I am, man. I'm a cartoonist. Where I make my bread and butter now, and my primary source of income is I'm a caricature artist. But I'm at kind of sort of at the next level, meaning that if you go to a carnival or go to a festival or you go to a theme park and you see those quick caricature artists that draw them and tell them to you, that's retail work. I do private events. So I do the same sort of thing as far as drawing characters, but I do traditional, which is just black and white on paper, and I draw one face about every 3 minutes and can knock them out quickly. So I do a college campuses, weddings, corporate events and things all the time. And then I do a digital version where I draw it on an iPad with a flat screen TV so people can see what I'm drawing. Print that out 4x6 on a lanyard and people wear it around their neck. And I do a lot of conventions and conferences for that. So
cool.
Very lucrative for me now. And the way that I got started in it was I always liked to draw from the time I was a kid. And if you guys remember Mad Magazine, that got my really quick when I was young because they drew faces. I was really into faces, and they would make fun of movies and TV shows. And for that to work, it had to be a caricature. It had to look like the celebrity, and that blew my mind. So Cat will tell you, we do these shows. You might be on the road 300 days out of the year, different town every night, different arena.
Whoa. You said 100 days. I remember I was on the road 200.
He said 3.
Days.
He said 300.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I heard 100. I'm just about to say, I was on the road 260 to 280 one time.
Yep. Yep. And I was on every house show, it felt like. And so you'd have to be, they'd want you at the arena 3 days at noon for a show that doesn't go live until 7 p.m. So I started getting bored, and I began, I didn't play cards like some of those guys. Sometimes I played Madden with Booker T on his PlayStation, whatever. But
yeah. Booker T used to always come in and hook up his video game thing.
Sure
So he'll be in the back playing video games on the monitor. We supposed to be watching wrestling, watching the show on. He'll hook that thing up, and everybody will come back there and say, Booker T, turn this thing off.
Yep. So I brought dry erase markers, and I would draw the guys on the whiteboards in the back. And Kurt Hennig loved it, man. He'd sit back there and just laugh for hours, and he'd go, draw Hulk Hogan. So I said, okay, I draw Hulk. And he goes, now draw him really old. Okay. Now draw him with an oxygen mask and a walker. And I'm going, Kurt, I don't need that kind of heat. And he goes, oh, he won't care, man. Tell him you don't write the news, just report it. And then, the guys, Ross Foreman for WCW magazine and Bill Apter for his magazines, they would watch me draw these cartoons. And so they asked me to do cartoons for the wrestling magazines. And I immediately realized, okay, I'm not a professional artist. I'm the wrestler that can kind of sort of draw. So I can't lose this gig. So I did a column for the WCW magazine every month. There was a little cartoon called Lashing Out. And I tried every month to get a little better, more sophisticated. That by the time that wasn't a thing anymore, when WCW got sold, I went to PWI and I went to the Wrestler and did cartoons for them. So I did them overall for about 13 years. And by the time I stopped doing wrestling cartoons, I was a professional by that point. I'd polished myself up and had some tools in the toolbox. And that's what
was awesome.
Let me ask you this then, Mr. Lash LeRoux.
Yes, sir.
How did you come up with the name and the character, Lash LeRoux?
So
who helped that? I know we touched on that a little bit, but you really never gave me that. Lash LeRoux, is that your real name?
So I'll tell you first about the name, and then I'll get to the character. So the way I come about the name is this. My real name is LeRoux. That's my real last name, spelled the same way, that Cajun French spelling and everything. And because of that last name, LeRoux, my entire life as a nickname, people just throw out Lash whenever they hear it. Because there was an old cowboy in the 30s and 40s, about the time of Autry and all those guys, Roy Rogers, that was named Lash LeRoux. And he was the first guy. Was kind of a badass back then because he wore black and a black hat at a time when all the good guys wore white, and he had a bullwhip. And so people remembered that character because of that. But as time went on, they would remember the name, but not really remember where they knew it from, And Jody Hamilton really gravitated to that because that was right in Bill House. So he never called me anything but Lash LeRoux. And I was used to it at that point. Wasn't a big deal. And he calls me into his office one day pretty early on. And he goes, hey, kid. And I go in there and he goes, do you think that you're going to wrestle as Lash LeRoux? And I said, well, yeah, that's what I thought I would do because, it's got some name value in it. And also the other reason why I decided I'd go by Lash LeRoux is because I went down to Orlando and one of my first matches in WCW, I wrestled as Mark LeRoux. That's my other middle name. My full name is Jonathan Mark Lash LeRoux now. And, Mark is what I went by growing up. And I went down and I met Terry Taylor for the first time, who was a booker. And Terry has got that sarcastic humor, Cat. And I went and I met him for the first time, wanted to introduce myself to him. And I said, Mr. Taylor, I just want to introduce myself to you. I'm Mark. And he looked at my hand that I stuck out to shake his hand. He just looked at it and goes, I'm sure you are, kid. And he just kept walking. And that's when I realized, okay, Mark is not a name that works very well in the wrestling business.
No.
So, on that one. And so came back, and then I had that conversation with Jody, and Jody said, well, kid, if you're going to use Lash, here's what I would do. He said, some of these promoters are terrible about trying to copyright your name and trying to trademark it, pull it out from underneath you. He goes, I would go home to the probate office in your hometown, and just like a woman that gets married and changes her last name, I would just legally add Lash to my name, and then nobody can ever take it from you. He goes, don't change who you are. Don't change your name. Just add it to it. So I went, petitioned the court down here, probate office. I was in there maybe less time than it takes you to get your license renewed. I went in and just filled out the form, handed it to the judge. The judge goes, "Now, why are you doing this?" And I just told him because I was trying to protect the name, and it's a stage name, wrestling, and that sort of thing. And he goes, "Okay, no problem." He signs off on it and makes my name legally Jonathan Mark Lash LeRoux from the time I was 18 years old. And so I never had an issue in WCW. When Vince signed me to a contract, they had.
But wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
This is coming clear right here now. This is what I heard. When Vince was signing everybody from WCW, he didn't just do 24. He gave anybody who wanted to sign with him, even if it was a 2-week, 30-day contract, like Buff Bagwell, who else? Scott Steiner, DDP, they had a short stay over there. What they was doing is they were getting your name on their WWE contract so they can use your name on video game and throughout the rest of WCW.
Your name and likeness. Yeah.
Yes.
And not have to pay you for it.
And not have to pay you for it. So that's why they were signing us with the cheap ass contract, trying to impact what they're doing to wrestling and trick us. That's a damn trick. Did you fall for it?
Well, no, because the licensing runs the same term as the contract does for talent. So that licensing only lasts for as long as they have you under contract as talent, right? And,
Oh, no. Yeah. My lawyer looked at that and he told me they have the right to continue to use that like on a video game. If they put
only if the video game was made while you were under contract could they use it. Yeah. Now, after you left and they come out with a new video game, they couldn't put the Cat or Lash into that.
No, but they did. They put me on on the TV network. You know, like
that's a whole different deal.
Where's Ernest the Cat Miller? What is Ernest Cat Miller did on the video game? They still had me on the next video game, and I only got pennies. I would get a $5 check from the video game.
Yeah. Here's the other thing. You brought up something that needs to be looked at by lawyers. Is this? You know, the merchandising part of it, I understand, and they only had my name and my likeness for the time that I was there in the term that I was there, which they never did any merchandising for me, so that wasn't an issue. But the streaming is something we never get paid for and never get compensated. If that was a TV show we were on, if people were watching it on Netflix, you'd get all kinds of residuals. And so where's that money at is what I think should be looked at.
But you know what, Les? I still get checks from WWE, but they like $14 and $15 and $20. And I was like, why are they still sending me these checks? And how much do I mean, what's the real price? What do I really what should I be getting?
Well, the percentages were very, very, very low. And I didn't feel like I was in a position to try to negotiate those. Mostly I was protecting my image and my likeness so that they wouldn't own it in perpetuity, meaning that they wouldn't own it forever and that they couldn't trademark it on their own. So I protected myself from that standpoint. Mostly a different perspective is this. For instance, someone like The Undertaker. The Undertaker can't, as big of a star as he is, without having a separate agreement with WWE, he can't be The Undertaker anywhere other than WWE unless they approve it, because they came up with that character and they created it. That's what they approved that they did and everything in WCW. And if it was a WCW product that WCW created and then they bought all of those intellectual properties, they then would own them. And that's what they thought was the case with me, is they thought WCW had to have come up with this character. They had to have come up with the name. So they have to own it now. And so I was able to call them, because by that point it had been my name for 3, 4, 5 years or so. And so I called them and I said, no, it's my real name. Send them a copy of my driver's license. And they go, oh, okay, no problem. And from then on, it wasn't never an issue ever again. They changed my contract before I signed it. And that was part of the terms of the negotiation. But that's where the name came from. And then the character was just something I developed over the time. They put a microphone in front of my face when I first started there when I was about 18 years old. And growing up in Alabama, in middle of nowhere and had never been anywhere, I sound like I grew up in Alabama and I've never been anywhere. I sound about like this. And they go, whoa, you can't talk like that on TV. Southern is considered ignorant. on TV. You got to drop an accent. And so I tried to drop it, man. I worked for a couple of months, and then it hit me one day, and I go, Dusty Rhodes always had that lisp. He never dropped it. He just turned it into a character, baby. And so he became the American named Dusty Rhodes, and he could just use that thing. And I said the same thing with Macho. Macho had kind of a gravelly voice, but he didn't talk like this when you were around him. No, dig it. He was a little bit more mellow than that. So I thought if they could have gimmick voices, maybe I can't drop my Southern accent, but I can mask it a little bit. And my dad, supposedly, the story, and I never knew, but was from Lafayette, Louisiana, was from that area. And I grew up in Alabama watching this Cajun cook that would come on public television. And he would tell these great stories. And he'd go, all right, you sit yourself down right here. We're about to make the best food you ever put in your mouth, I guarantee. Good. And his name was Justin Wilson. He go, a little wine for the chicken, a little wine for the And so, you know what? I can't hide my Southern accent, but I can cover it up with a Cajun accent. And I became the raging Cajun, Lash LeRoux. And the first place WCW ever sent me for an autograph signing was to Lafayette, Louisiana. And I thought, oh, man, here we go. And I got over there, and they had no trouble, man, just embracing it, believing it, supporting it. And I thought, if I don't have any trouble in Louisiana in the middle of Cajun country, I'm sure not going to have any problem when I go to Brooklyn or Los Angeles or anywhere else. So,
True.
And I think, Cat, you were even with us a few of those years that we did the Mardi Gras. We were Grand Marshals.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. I remember we did the Mardi Gras and they had us on this. I don't know what it was. It was a car with a rooftop open. And we were throwing these little cars and beads, right? And people were just begging us. We would go by, Ray, the crowd. The crowd
showing them titties.
They wanted these plastic cups that we had. And I remember we could throw the plastic cup in the wind and in a curve and go right to people. So what me and who was that? Me and I think Ray Lord. We started throwing the cups out to where it looked like it was going to somebody else, but then the cup would come right back to the people and dunk them right on the head.
And they had Mardi Gras beads. I still got all of those, believe it or not.
Oh, yes. It was a great time, man. I mean, it was fun being in a parade like that, man. Just watching the people having a good time. Those were some good days. But now let me ask you this, Big Ray.
Yeah.
Talking to this young fella right here, Big Ray, what do you think? Were you a fan of?
Absolutely, absolutely. He came to me. He kind of came out of nowhere, and I, as a mark, I'm sure you are, and I am. I was like, wow, I like this guy. I mean, he's got a good, your promos were solid. Your ring work was good. I don't know who taught you how to throw the drop kick, but it was awesome. You were sound. You could tell you were an amateur wrestler. I wrestled all through high school, so I could tell you had a basic knowledge of amateur wrestling. So that being said, as the cruiserweight division blossomed, you were an integral part of it there for a few years. So I was a fan.
Can I tell you this, Lash LeRoux? I did not like any of you guys. I didn't. You guys just get on my nerves because they were smart guys and all they did was talk. I was like that uncle who would show up every now and then and they loved and run their mouth. And so I think one time they told Lash LeRoux to teach the cat a lesson or something. Get in the ring and shoot on me or something.
No, that never happened. That never happened. Now that happened times at the power plant. They would get me in there because I didn't look like a shooter, but I could shoot on these guys when they came to the track. But I'll say this. I'll say this about you, Cat. Cat likes to play the heel really well because he does play it really well. But I tell you, when I realized, hey, sorry, that's my dog. That's my dog. I got guys cutting grass, and he's decided he saw them now. But when I first met Cat, Cat's he would pop off at me right away. He had that smart aleck type of personality about him, and he had that biting wit, and he had that sarcasm. And right away, what I realized was this dude likes me because I'd gone through enough high school sports with coaches and everything else. If somebody don't like you, they won't say anything to you.
Yeah, they won't even speak to you.
A hard time all the time, like Cat did with me, then they see something in you. And that's why I never took anything he said personally in all seriousness, and always took it as that was our way of cutting up and camaraderie. And that's the stuff I miss about the business more than anything else is the boys.
Now let me ask you something. Who was the one guy, the biggest name you wrestled? Who was it?
Probably the biggest name at that time that I wrestled was Scott Hall. I had a good little run where they did a WCW heavyweight title tournament. And just the way things, matter of fact, we wrestled in that tournament, Cat. I just remembered that because
we did. Yeah.
The way that everything fell in that tournament was, I think you and I wrestled, and I think it was one of the few wins I got over you, but it was because
wait.
That's what I was waiting to hear.
Kid. Yeah. Kid, listen, you not gonna come on my podcast and tell lies. There's no way they put you over the Cat.
Hey, somebody interfered, Cat, but here it gets better.
No. You know what? I do remember that, but as you noticed, I wasn't one of the kind. I was not the wrestler who did not want to lose. I wanted to lose.
Yeah, right. Well, it helped your character too. It helped your heat.
Exactly.
Helped your heat. And then the next week, I wrestled Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig, and they put me over against Kurt, and I couldn't believe it. I'm for the world title tournament, right? And Kurt, I will never forget that match because he was such an awesome worker, and they were going to have him lay me out even though I got the win. So I hit him, pin him 1, 2, 3. And while I'm celebrating, he slides out and he gets a chair. And he comes with a chair shot. I'll never forget, Cat. I asked him, I said, how you want me to feed? For that, he goes, you just feed around. He goes, I'm going to tell you ahead of time. I don't swing over the head. He swings it sideways like a baseball bat. And I go, I don't know about that, but this is Kurt because it's Kurt Hennig. I'm gonna trust him on it. I'm gonna trust him on it. I'm gonna listen to him. He knows what he's doing. He's an awesome worker. And so I feed around. He swings that thing like a baseball bat, and I'm just gritting my teeth going, this is going to be horrible. He's going to take my head off. That thing sounded like a gunshot. It went, pow, and I never felt it. To this day, I don't know how he throws a chair shot like that, but it was just so loud, and I never even felt it. He laid me out, and then the following week in that tournament, I got beat by Scott Hall.
Hold on. Now, let me ask you something. How did you feel when the booker, who was booking that match? I know you might not remember. Was it Paul Orndorff?
Agent on the match, but that was when Vince Russo came in. So I don't remember who it was, but that was a Vince Russo idea. That was his creation.
Listen, bro,
so
you're going over, bro.
How did you feel? How did you feel when they told you was about to wrestle such a big character, a big name like Kurt Hennig? Did it make you?
Yeah. Well, it didn't make me nervous. It made me feel honored and privileged to get an opportunity to learn from those guys. Like, I never cared. I'm like you, man. It didn't matter to me whether I was winning or losing because I felt like if the match gets over, everybody gets over. If you have a good match, it doesn't matter who really got the win in the end because if the people go crazy for it, they're going to remember you for it. And just being in the ring with guys like that ups your profile.
Up your profile. And I'm going to tell you this. For a short, brief time, they had me losing to a lot of big name guys. Hogan, Macho Man. I was doing the job for a lot of them. So one of my best friends, who always got something, is always a best friend, asked me one day in front of a whole crowd, why do you lose all the time? And then I told him, I said, the next time you watch the match and watch me lose, I want you to look closely at my face, and you're going to see a smile on my face. And that smile going to be me thinking about this check. I'm just getting rid of the cash.
Absolutely. My response to that was always, does it pay the same? Yeah. All right. Then I don't care who wins.
I don't care who wins.
There's going over and getting over.
But I think this right here for you though. I think you were so much of a talent, man, and so athletic that people wanted to use you to get themselves over. You was a good get. You was like a young Ric Flair, talented. You can talk. You had a good gimmick. You could have went heel or babyface.
Well, I think what really helped me a lot, Ernest, was this, brother. When I came out of the power plant and they let me have some matches, and I was doing Saturday night shows, you know, the evolution for me was first I came in as a nobody and I'm just doing jobs. And I did a few jobs. And then when I just happened to get booked against somebody like a Scott Steiner or a Rick Steiner or a Buff Bagwell or somebody like that, then I would come back, or Ray Lloyd even, you know, against Glacier. I'd come back the next week and they would be booked against somebody else that they're beating in a squash match. And they'd walk over to the booker and they go, hey, if this is just an enhancement match, does it really matter who I'm wrestling? And they would go, no. Well, then I want to wrestle Lash because I know what he'll do for me. I know he'll make me look good. And then it becomes them wanting to give you more and more and more in the match. And as you're getting more, even though you're losing because the guys respect you, now all of a sudden I'm wrestling guys like the Cat. And I might be losing that match against the Cat, but it's more competitive. And now I'm winning matches, guys like, you know, Lenny or Lodi, somebody like that.
Yeah, going over and getting over. So it don't matter who goes over as long as you get over. It doesn't matter. So, and that's
right.
what you did. You got over. You got over with the crowd. They were behind you.
Hey, Big Ray, but guess what? It was a lot of guys in that locker room who would not take a loss. They don't
listen,
want,
brother.
I don't know why.
Listen, brother. You don't need to bring that up, dude.
I don't know why, but these guys would not take a loss. They did not want to lose. They did not want to work with with new talent.
That's not going to work for me, brother.
Have you ever known of a match that they wanted to make, but then maybe the other guy did not want to work with you?
Not with me. I didn't hear that. But I've heard it with other guys before, and I know that it was happening back there, and I know you're right about that. My mentality was always this, man. Like you asked me a little bit earlier about the character. The way I got the character over with being the Raging Cajun was they never set me down, and we never talked about any of it, man. I started adding stuff to my character. So, again, talking about losing, I might be losing a match on Saturday night, but even if I was getting nothing in that match, nothing at all, the time that I walked through that curtain till I got to the ring was my time. I could do whatever I wanted to during that. Nobody could stop me. So, like, if I wanted to be the Raging Cajun, what did I do? I went and had Raging put on one side of my tights, Cajun on the other, and I knew guys like Bobby Heenan and Mike Tenay are going to pick up on that. Larry Zbyszko is going to mention that when he sees it on my tights. They're going to call me the Raging Cajun, whether I'm announced that way or not. Then I brought out Mardi Gras beads, and I started throwing them out without asking anybody if I could do them or not. The same way my sideburns. You know, when I first started at the power plant, I got pulled to the side, and they said, hey, kid, you need to grow some facial hair. You look like that kid from the movie Rudy. Because I was like 18 years old, all baby face. And so I grew my hair out, and all it would do was just afro curl up like it does. That's why I have to keep it shaved underneath. That's all it does, just curl up from the top. And then I grew out these big Elvis pork chop sideburns, because I was a big Elvis fan, and everybody had a goatee, so I didn't want to have a goatee. And I looked in the mirror one day, and I realized, you know what? I could shave those sideburns to make them L's, to make it part of my gimmicks, Lash LeRoux. And
there you go.
Lash, let me ask you something. Coming from the background that you came from, poor, you know, struggling, trying to make things work, what did you do with your first paycheck from wrestling?
My first paycheck that I got in wrestling, man, I put it in the bank and sat on it. Every paycheck. I was always so frugal with my money. Like, I remember I got married when my first big check that I got for that first video game, in fact, I bought 2 houses instead of one big house. I bought 2 small houses in a small neighborhood because by that point, my mother-in-law, who had helped me that junior and senior year, and they had kind of supported me while I was driving back and forth and training at the power plant, she got a terminal illness, and she went from having a home-based business where she made a lot of money to where now all of a sudden she was getting foreclosed on and everything else. So I bought a house I was able to rent out to her across the street from my wife, and then the house that we lived in. And I'll never forget, Cat, I lived so tight with my money that I had to have the water company come out, turn the water on, and check everything out. And the guy recognized me from wrestling, from TV, and he goes, man, you live here? I can't believe you live in such a small house. you know. But
hey, hey, because it wasn't because of that, because you're cheap.
yeah, compared to anything I had when I was a kid, man. And so I always paid my taxes. I always lived on far less than I was making. But I'll also say this. If I told you my first contract and stuff, WCW, and the kind of money I was making, I was way down there, dude. I was way down there. And the reason why is because, first, I wasn't greedy. Two, I didn't know how to speak up for myself. And three, one of the things that perspective teaches you, like people ask me all the time, Lash, how is it that you weren't a bigger name in wrestling and why did you not accomplish more? And it was because once WCW got sold and I was kind of thrown to the wolves and I was out there in the wilderness, I realized nobody ever taught me the business. Dude, I was in my mid-20s, not even quite 30 yet, and realized I knew how to wrestle. I knew how to get in the ring and have any kind of a match with anybody. I knew the creative aspect of it. I knew what a good match was. I knew the psychology. I knew how to get over with the fans, but I didn't know the business of the business. I didn't know how to market myself, play the game.
Listen, none of us did.
Exactly.
I was learning as I went along. And the first thing I learned to do is go find this guy and Barry Blooms. That's all I said. If you know his name, you know who he is, right?
Absolutely, I know his name, man. And I never had an agent or anything else, man.
Oh, Barry was an agent that worked wonders for people. He got the most he could get for you. And he used a lot of the top names. And at that time, I did not want to use him because Eric Bischoff was one of my good friends, and I knew he kind of didn't like Barry Blooms too much. So I walked into the office and sat down, and I got the most I could get, and we're reaching for more.
Yep. Here's the way that it went for me, Cat. This is the truth, and I'll be completely honest and open with everybody. Transparent on the Cat's Corner here today. So I had gotten enough matches in WCW at this point that that there were a few websites that were thrown up as tribute sites. Back when wrestling fans, the internet was in its infancy, and wrestling fans would just do tribute websites. And I saw several of them online, and so I knew I was kind of getting over with the fans. And then WCW had sent me to do that first video game with EA Sports. Here's the whole difference. When I went to that video game with EA Sports, that's what really put me on the map, because the story I was telling a little bit earlier but didn't quite finish was when they came to the power plant and they were filming, they said, okay, who can do power moves? Well, I was strong enough. I'm strong for my size anyway, and I'm a pretty thick guy. I could do power slams, power bombs, whatever they needed. And so they got the power moves. They go, okay, who can do chain wrestling like Dean Malenko? And I'm like, well, I wrestled in high school, so I slid in the ring before. I volunteered for everything before anybody else got a chance to. And so I did all the chain wrestling. And then they go, who could do the lucha libre style? Nobody could do that other than the Mexican wrestlers that were coming in. But I had taught myself how to do it. So I stepped in the ring. I was doing all the flying head scissors and the hurricane ranas. And so they went to WCW, and they asked for me to come up to Vancouver to do the shoot for the video game. And WCW's first reaction to them was, well, he's not under contract. If you get someone who's under contract, it'll save everybody more money, us more money, you more money. And EA Sports came back and they go, no, we're so impressed with him that we will pay him to come up there and do it. So they paid a daily rate. Yeah. And so I came back from that, and then I had printed out just sheets. I made hard copies of some of these tribute websites because I didn't know any better. I didn't know how to utilize the internet. I put it all in a file folder, and at the time, Paul Orndorff was the vice president of talent relations. He was kind of the go-to guy, he and J.J. Dillon. And so I went and got a meeting with Paul and sat down in his office and showed him all these websites that I had printed out. And I go, until I get kind of popular with the fans, I feel like I've learned everything that I can learn at the power plant. The only other thing I'm going to learn is by wrestling guys that are better than me. I'm ready mentally. I'm ready physically. I got the psychology of the business down. I need to know whether I have a future in WCW or if I need to pursue other options. All I knew was that was a good little catchphrase. I didn't have any other options, man. But I thought I'm going to throw that out there. Do I have a future in WCW or should I pursue other options? My other option was to come back to Alabama and dig ditches. But whatever, it worked. you know, and I wound up getting a contract out of the blue from WCW. I was on the road. They just FedExed me one. And my first contract from WCW, I think, was $750 a week. And I was making that on the contract that I signed. And very quickly, I remember going on a run right after I signed that, like 2 or 3 months into that contract. I was on the road 7 days a week. And I was having to pay for my own rental car, my own
Oh, my
room,
God.
for my food. Yeah. The only thing they paid for was my airfare. And so I called them up and I go, look, I'm not trying to be greedy and I'm not selfish at all. And I appreciate this opportunity I've been given. But look, I'm spending about $700 a week just on expenses on the road. And I need to pay my bills back home. Can I get a bump in pay? And that's when they bumped me from $750 to $1,000 a week. And then I went from $1,000, I think, to like $1,500 or something like that. You know, and then towards the end of WCW, I started making some decent money, some really good money. In fact, I had about a 2-week deal there where I signed with WWE, where I was getting paid by both companies for about maybe 4 weeks. I was getting double paychecks. So
Oh, wow.
Look at it. Look at it. Why you smiling? You think you got over on Vince McMahon, huh?
I don't know. No,
Hey, with that smile like that, I'm gonna call up there and tell him. He gonna see me.
yeah. Hey, they'll still think they got it cheap because then when they cut my pay, when they called and asked me to take a pay cut, when I went to WWE, I went to WWE. I'll go ahead and say it right now. And I went up there for $1,000 a week is what they were paying me, and I was having to live up in Cincinnati. And so what really broke us up there mentally, you had me, Alan Funk, Rick Cornell, and Jamie Noble were all sharing a 1-bedroom apartment. That's after we got out of the Econo Lodge that we were in. We were just in a hotel room that had 2 beds in it, sharing it, splitting it 4 because we had to live up there and then send all of our money back home to our families to pay our bills. And we weren't getting paid any additional money because they weren't considered WWE shows that we were doing.
And it's so crazy, man, that wrestling was doing really well then. You know, I go back to WCW and I tell you this, I was getting paid $150,000 a month. And the only thing they wasn't doing for me is paying for my hotel room and cars.
Yeah.
So, but I was making enough money to do that. But then I went to Barry and Goldberg said, hey, I know these guys was getting paid. Some of them getting paid $150,000 per show, every show.
Yeah.
So, and then plus they were paying for the airfare, private jets. You know, Goldberg got his own plane. He got his own hotel. So I went to the guys and told them, I said, listen, I'm on the road like this. I don't want to pay any of my money. So, you know, I was able to do that. But looking back on guys like you guys were doing a lot of the hard work too. You know, you guys were doing a lot of matches, opening up for guys. Cause there was a time where those guys who were making $150,000 per show, Monday Night, Thunder, you know, that's right there 2 nights. That's $300,000 a week. You had guys like that were making that money who didn't want to work.
Yep.
They were getting angry. They was upset because of whatever. They did not want to work. They did not want to be on the road. They just wanted the money. And a lot of the time they just got the money.
Hey, and here's what's crazy about it is I loved it. I would have kept doing it if they had treated me right and not for a whole lot more money than what I was making, Cat. And what was maddening when I was up in Cincinnati, they had HWA in Cincinnati, and then they had Louisville over there was their other training. OVW. Yeah. And so I would have to drive back and forth and help train the guys over there as well as train the guys at HWA. We had 3 shows a week, and I was there Monday through Thursday. I would finish training guys on Thursday, throw my back of my truck, drive 8 hours back home just so I could have Friday with my wife, then have to drive back on Saturday to wrestle a show on Saturday night I wouldn't get paid for. Meanwhile, they got all those guys staying, all these kids are on Tough Enough, and they're staying in a mansion.
Wow. Was Jim Cornette running OVW at the time when you were up there?
Yeah, it was Jim Cornette and Danny Davis.
And who was running the one in Cincinnati?
Les Thatcher.
Les Thatcher. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was Les's deal. I saw Les just last year, as a matter of fact, and he looked at me and goes, "Dang, Lash, why'd you wait till you got out of the business to get in shape?" Because
Hey. Now, are you preaching these days? I heard you were big in the church. Are you preaching?
Yeah, I'm an associate pastor at my church on staff. Like I said, if you're doing that correctly, doing ministry right, you're not making a killing doing it. So
you're doing it for the love.
Staff, yeah, I do it because I love the people and I love the ones that I'm around. And I'm such a loyalist at heart. My senior pastor was my student pastor, my youth pastor growing up. And so I've known this family since I was 9 years old, and their families built houses in our hometown. They were residential construction guys, and their family also had clothing stores. So that's who I worked for from the time I was 9 years old. Went off and I did the rest.
Full circle. It goes back to where you were sleeping at that department store.
That's exactly right. That's the kind of person I am. I believe in that.
Hey, Lash, let me ask you something. I know I want to hear about you, church and being a great Christian. But what I want to know, what wrestler disappointed you once you met him? Somebody that you thought
Lex Luger.
Okay.
Lex did. Now, and look, I say that with full honesty, saying that right now, what I've seen of Lex Luger, and I haven't had a chance to talk to him directly, not that he owes me anything at all, but from what I've seen, he seems to have made just a 180-degree turnaround completely.
God can do anything.
And God can do, that's exactly right. So I'm proud of where Lex is at. So I'm not knocking Lex now. But
where he was at,
yep.
God could let you do what you wanted to do with him.
Right. So I'll tell you, this is a quick Lex story. Not that this matters to Lex at all, because we were never close or anything like that. But I remember being around Lex, and he was okay with me because, you always treated the boys okay. But you could see how the wrestlers treated other fans and other people.
Exactly. Yes.
And that's something I could never stand. And I would see Lex, how he would treat fans or how he would treat other people and how he acted like a superstar and had this arrogance about him. And it really bothered me. And it bothered me to such an extent that when he went through all that trouble and first had that difficulty and was going to go to jail or whatever it was with all that stuff that happened, I got
to jail. He went to jail.
Exactly. And I'm trying to be as kind and generous as I can, Cat, but you're right.
Don't be you on the Cat's corner. Tell the truth.
Okay, so here's the truth. I got a call from a promoter, and at the time I had left WWE and I had left wrestling and was about to completely retire from wrestling. I just had enough. I was burned out. I was beat up, and I wasn't feeling good about myself, and I didn't know what was going to be next. And I had a buddy that owned a gym in my hometown, so I was helping him run his gym is what my day job was at that point. I was cleaning toilets, Cat, and sweeping floors. That's the truth. You want some truth on the Cat's corner? That's what I was doing. So I was in the middle of vacuuming somebody else's gym when I got a call from a promoter asking me would I come to Atlanta and work on a tribute show for Lex Luger so all the proceeds could go to him because he was going through so much trouble at the time. And I said, look, I wish Lex well. I'll be praying for Lex. But Lex had a career that was about 10 years longer than mine and made about 100 times more money than I did. So if Lex doesn't have any money left, then that would be Lex's fault, not mine. And it's the consequences of his actions. And that was my perspective at the time. And that's how I felt about it. And I thought, why would I put my body on the line to go wrestle on a show where all the money goes to him when he got himself into all this trouble that he's in? I could use a tribute show right now, and I've done the right thing. I mean, come on. I never made that.
And you weren't a jerk. To people.
I did the right thing, and I wasn't making that kind of money. I did the right thing.
So let's go back to the other side. Which did you have somebody that impressed you?
Yeah, somebody that impressed me. I was a much bigger, this is from a business standpoint. I'm going to speak from a business standpoint first. From a business standpoint, I was so impressed with Ric Flair after I became a wrestler because growing up, I hated Ric Flair because you were supposed to. He did such a great job being a heel. But when I realized what it took to work on the level that Rick would have had to work on, for the longevity, for the amount of time that he did it, and the grind of being on the road as much as he was defending the title, that for him to be able to pull that off year after year and compete at such a high level super impressed me. Now, from a personal standpoint, I also understood and realized too why you can never lose yourself in the business and never take yourself too seriously, because you're not going to have much of a home life if you do. And to get to a certain level, I think, in entertainment in general, not just in professional wrestling, but also if you're an actor, if you're a comedian, if you're a musical artist, I think there comes a point to where the most important thing in your world has to be you, or you're not going to get to that next level, because you have to neglect a lot of other people to be that superstar.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said. Well said. My biggest disappointment was meeting the cat.
Now, I was really impressed. I was impressed with Rick. I was also impressed with Dusty.
Oh my goodness! Hey, so Lash, listen, brother. I'm glad to get you on, man, and we want to get you on again once we have. We want to sit down and really continue to get into your career, because I think you just started, man. I still think God bless you and your life gonna keep continuing to grow. And I just see some good things in you. We'd love to have you back here on the podcast.
Hey, absolutely.
Anytime, Cat. I'm in a great place in my life, man, where a lot of things have come full circle. And I grew up the way that I grew up, so it gave me probably more pride than I deserved from the standpoint of being too stubborn to ask for help. So a lot of the reasons why I didn't get any opportunities beyond WWE is I wasn't calling around looking for jobs. I wanted people to see it in me and want to call me. As I've gotten older now, I've gotten far more grateful and appreciative for connections I made to people I consider friends like you, Kat. I mean that. And so the people that I do truly consider good people that I had a great opportunity to be around, I've loved reconnecting with them. And I count them as people I would do anything in the world. We're almost like soldiers that have been off to a battlefield, right? We may not have gotten shot at, but we experienced this life thing together at a level and doing something that only a few people get to do. And that bonds you in a way that the average person can't understand and will never know. And it becomes a brotherhood that I think is so awesome to be able to carry with us through the rest of it. We're a fraternity, man, at this point. We really are.
Absolutely. And from an outsider standpoint, looking at you, and it might be the lighting, I don't know, but there's a glow coming off of you. You look at like you're at peace, and you look happy. And a lot of guys that transition out of the sport don't ever get that kind of peace and don't ever get that kind of clarity in their life. So that's God. That's God, like you said before.
Now, that's his opinion now. We're not saying it's fact. That's his opinion. I think in all walks of life, things that you got the ups and downs. You got people that's going to float and do some good stuff, and you got people that's going to have problems. So, it's just good right now to see you doing what you're doing right now, happy.
And I appreciate that, Cat. And I feel the same way about you, and I mean what I'm about to say, too. I was so proud when I saw you in that movie, The Wrestler. Because here's something that I really feel like happened to professional wrestlers, and exactly what Big Shug's talking about there is so many guys get so wrapped up in the character that they were on TV, and they get so wrapped up in the money, and they get so wrapped up in the accolades from wrestling fans that they can't find an identity for themselves outside of professional wrestling. So when the rug's pulled out from underneath them, whatever the reason is, if they don't have that contract and that status of being a wrestler for WWE or WCW, they don't know what to do with themselves. And I think there's something to be said for, you need to be reminded. It took a long time, man. When I turned 40 in 2016, I weighed 318 pounds and I had a 40 waist. And it was because I had fallen into that trap. And I looked in the mirror and I said, look, here's the thing. Barring some unforeseen circumstances, I'm only halfway through this life. If I get that allotted 80, 86 years, at 40 years old, man, I was only about halfway through this thing. I refuse to believe my best years are behind me just because wrestling thing is over. And I started to reinvent myself and find an identity outside of wrestling. And when you find that identity outside of wrestling, you're reminded then that what you brought to the table, Cat, and what I brought to the table was us uniquely having some talent, some ability. And I don't care what anybody says, it wasn't being in the right place at the right time. It wasn't a luck of the draw. It wasn't, oh, fate smiled on me and I got lucky. No. It was you had talent you brought to the table, and I needed to be reminded that I was still that person. And we do that in life.
But you know, that transition from a job like being a pro wrestler to like the everyday job, that is a problem. And it's challenging mentally. It's not just in your pocketbook where you're making less money. But what happened to me with the business, once I went to WWE, I saw a different side. You know, WCW like family. We traveled the whole world together, making money. Everybody was happy. You know, well, pretty much everybody was happy. But when I got to WWE, man, it was like private school. Nobody wanted to talk to each other. Everybody was afraid somebody was taking their job. You know, and it was almost like WWE business was a business. And now you're going to either have to sell everything you have to us and let us control you, or we going to smash you like a little ant and kick you out. So what that did for me is it made me fight mad. Like, wait a minute, I got other things I could do other than just be a pro wrestler. I'm not going to let Vince McMahon shit on my head.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let Johnny Ace turn me into a cockroach. You know, I'm not going to go for that. I'd rather leave this business and be respected, you know, leave this business. And when I left the business, I didn't have to leave. I didn't get fired. They didn't say, hey, you're not good at this, Cat. My body wasn't beat up. My mind just said, this is not for you. You're not going to go do other things. And when I left this business, I realized that behind me in this business, I created something that nobody could take away. I created another family, some great friendship, people like you, even Big Ray. I created this stuff right here in this life. Like, there's no reason for me to leave I can leave the business, but I don't have to leave the lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who do I make the check out to?
Yeah. Hey, I'm so glad you said that, man, because that's the way I've always felt about it. I've always been the guy that I completely shake my head when people talk about how political WCW was compared to WWE. And I'm going, man, I don't know other people's perspective, but for me, it was always just a family in WCW. I enjoyed every minute of it, man. And we felt like a grind. Did.
Listen, it was the best time, man. I mean, think about it. We were traveling. I got to go places I never thought I would be able to go, man. You know, I traveled all over the world, Dubai, Africa, Australia, just traveling, seeing the world. And it seemed like wherever you go, fans look alike. You know, all fans. I mean, I could go to Dubai. They look like the same fans I saw in Australia, you know, and then they all just wanted to see us, just be a part of that. That's a life right there, man, that I never want to just forget about, because it gave me, I'm gonna tell you, with my first check, I grew up kind of like not homeless, but you know, not a lot of money. My mom had me when she was 16. I was able to do something that I couldn't do. I tried pro football a little bit. I didn't make it. You know, I tried doing karate. I beat up a lot of people, but it wasn't in the money. Wrestling gave me the first check that I wanted. And that first check that I got, the first thing I did when I bought my mom a new house and told her the little house that she was living in, it was okay for her, but this is how I want you to live. I wanted to tell my kids, told my kids, this is the kind of school I want you to go to. I want you to be at the private school. I want you to be able to learn. Education is the way. So, you know, I was able to take care of my family and do some great things for my family. So I never looked down on wrestling. I never looked down on wrestling. And one thing I never did drugs. I didn't do pills with the boys. I didn't drink with the boys. I socialized with the boys. And then I would sneak away and go in my hotel room, and Ric Flair and everybody looking around, where's the cat? He's in his hotel room. So it's a life I love, man.
Hey, in fact, I'll give you this story, Cat, before we wrap up, man. Is just last year, as a matter of fact, when I walked away from wrestling, I've always been one of those kind of people. I flip a light switch and I'm done with something, you know. And when I decided that I was done with wrestling, I had a match with Bull Buchanan, and I knew we'd have a good match. I walked in, I said, "Hey, Bull, tonight's gonna be my last match." And he goes, "Yeah, sure, sure." He patted me on my back. We had a match, tore the house down. Man, we were the main event. When I was done, I rolled out of the ring. I didn't announce it. I didn't cut a promo at the show. I didn't put it on social media. I just knew I was done, and I hung up my boots. And for almost 15 years, you know, I just hid out away from wrestling, and I had nothing to do with wrestling. And I didn't even want to do conventions or autograph signings because I said, an autograph signing, even interviews. An interview will turn into an autograph signing. An autograph signing will turn into a promo. And a promo will turn into a match. And a match will turn into me being back in the wrestling business. Well, it kind of wound up sort of doing that. But I got talked into doing the podcast thing that I did for the last couple of years. And last year in Huntsville, they had a little mini con for the subscribers to the podcast family that I'm a part of there. And I was at that mini con. I got talked into kind of coming and just drawing caricatures, and I wouldn't have to be involved with anything wrestling related. So I drew caricatures, and they had a show throughout the day, and I got to see some of the boys I hadn't seen in almost 20 years, like Jeff Jarrett. Saw Eric again for the first time since WCW. Kevin Sullivan was there. I saw him, saw Jeff Jarrett, and we kind of hung out, and they did their thing, and they booked a show and did a little indie show that day. The whole time I just drew caricatures in the background. And after the show was over, we went to leave. We're closing down the building, and I looked around and I said, "Man, there's nobody left in here, and that ring's empty. I hadn't been in a ring in about 15 years. I got to see if I can still take a bump." And I slid, and I just took a quick back bump, and I went, "You know what? That feels pretty good." And then I stepped back into the turnbuckle, took one step out, took a front bump, went, "Wow, hey, that felt like riding a bicycle." There was a kid that had wrestled that day, and I threw him into the ropes, and he came off, and I threw a drop kick. And my timing was perfect, landed perfect, had not been in the ring at all. It felt athletic. It felt good. And right before I slid into the ring, Conrad Thompson had asked me, "Man, do you mind if I film this since it's the first time you've been in the ring in 15 years? I go, "Sure, go ahead." So I threw that drop kick. It felt so good. I popped up and I went, "Oh, I'm here for my day in the sun, and for one more run, I ain't done. I ain't done. I ain't done." They put it on Twitter, and it blew up a little bit at the time. And this was a year ago. And I got a call from GCW, and they asked me. They said, "What do you think about coming and doing one more match?" And so I wrestled Joey Janela in Chicago on Fight TV for GCW this time last year, as a matter of fact. First time in the ring in almost 50 years. And I had planned on training for it, knocking the ring rust off, but I was doing so many conventions through August of drawing caricatures. I literally came home from a convention on Thursday night, flew out the next day on Friday to Chicago to wrestle that night. Had new gear made for it, everything else. I have to send you the video, Cat, so you can watch it. We did a 15-minute match. I still did the splits, Cat. Did my James Brown stuff in the match. I did it, man. Get them old James Brown, did the splits, popped up, hit him with that, did the whiplash, to a table on him, did all the stuff on outside the ring. So it was like riding a bike, man. We did 15 minutes, never blew up. And I was so in the moment, more than I ever was in WCW, because there was no pressure there. I wasn't trying to get a job. I wasn't trying to impress anybody. The fans were chanting, "You still got it." And I was so, you ever been in the matches back in the day on Nitro where the pressure's there and you got tunnel vision? It's like, I just want to make, I hit all the marks right. And it's like it's all closed in, even though this is a huge arena. Well, it wasn't like that for this. For the first time ever, I was hyper aware of everybody around me, man. And I was so in the moment, and it felt great. I still love the business.
Hey,
awesome.
Listen, I was on those Monday night shows when it seemed like the spotlight was on everything that you did. I was nervous the whole day because, remember, I only spent 1 month training before they put me out there with the big boys. So Now, when I see matches, it don't mean anything because I was under pressure so much back then, and I was able to withstand that pressure. That now I can watch a match and do anything. You know, it helped me. And you know, I was a kind of shy person. I came out my shell a little bit because you had to perform. But listen, we can talk all day long, man, for another hour. But we want to just thank you, Big Ray. Close it out for us, Big Ray, and thanking our Lash LeRoux.
Well, Lash LeRoux, it was a great honor having you on the Cat's Corner podcast today. Pleasure meeting you. Cat, as always, are we plugging any sponsors, or we just do it on our own?
We still got Recite doing with us.
We still got Recite, your one-stop shop for all your construction needs in the metro Atlanta area. Lux Jewelers. Yeah. And we will catch up with Lash LeRoux. You can believe that. And till next time on the Cat's Corner, peace and chicken grease.
All right, guys. I hit